It's, of course, the country which has the largest military budget and this also has the most money to develop new weapons. It has a lot of allies which are very keen to buy advanced weapons. And when you buy advanced weapons and what comes with that, an alliance, you very quickly tend to turn to the US for those advanced weapons. Sometimes for lack of any competitors, sometimes because you want to buy from the US because it fits with your idea of being an ally of the US and having the US as an ally.
Well, for the first time in 25 years, the US was the largest arms supplier to Asia and Oceania, with Australia the world's 8th largest arms importer, thanks largely to its nuclear-powered submarine deal.
Yeah, Asia and Oceania has been for a very long time the area where most of the arms exports went to. Despite the growth in Europe and despite a lot of focus on the Middle East, Asia and Oceania remains the place where from both from East, West and Central Asia, weapons are being bought by countries that see serious problems with their neighbors. That is, of course, a worrying thing, yes.
What is India receiving as the world's top arms importer?
Basically, India is buying everything. It's a country which looks at it's at war with Pakistan, technically, and sometimes physically. It sees China as an increasing threat, and arms accordingly. Spends more on its military and still has the problem that its own industry is not very capable. It's a growing industry, it's becoming more capable, but it's still buying from other countries. And there it has looked more and more to Western countries, Europe, Israel, and especially the US also now, to replace what used to be Russia as the main supplier.
Well, French arms exports have climbed as well. Where is most of their equipment ending up?
Sort of everywhere. The Middle East and Asia, Oceania are the main export regions. They're not doing extremely well in Europe. It's really the Middle East where the big orders come from, but also India, Indonesia, and a number of other Asian countries are substantial and probably growing buyers of French weapons, especially of combat aircraft and ships.
And did it surprise you at all in your research that Russian arms exports have plummeted? You mentioned that before.
It didn't come as a surprise. Russian military technology is difficult to sustain by the Russians in the development of further upgrades or new technology. They just don't have the economy for it, nor the technical industrial background. So that's something that we saw coming. What we didn't see coming, of course, was 2022 and the reactions to that. It's a bit early to see what exactly the reactions are to 2022 from prospective buyers of Russian equipment, but there is a tendency to look at Russian weapons doing not so well. And what's probably more important is that the US and Western states have put a lot of pressure on prospective Russian clients and actually Russian clients not to buy from Russia. And that pressure works to some extent.
And interestingly, Siemon, China doesn't want to be dependent on Russian equipment either.
Yeah. That's mostly because China wants to do their own things. They want to develop their own weapons. It's a long-standing policy, and they're becoming more and more successful. Also, partly related to the fact that they do have the industrial base and they have the money to do so. And in the last few years, they have managed to basically get rid of all dependencies of foreign imports of weapons and main components for that. So in the very near future, China will probably drop out as an important or even as a medium arms importer.
And just lastly, you mentioned the Middle East is importing high volumes of arms, supporting several regional conflicts, which could explain a lot of your study's findings.
Yes, conflicts and tensions are, of course, the main driver for weapons to buy weapons. You see in the Middle East serious tensions with Iran, a number of Gulf countries. There are the conflicts in Yemen, there's the conflict in Syria, there's the conflict in Israel. It's all an enormous hotspot where countries do produce very little. The only exception to some extent is Israel, and they're very dependent on imports. They have the money very often and they have very willing suppliers. And of course, from the supplier side, there the issue is suppliers beware what you're doing, because the weapons are sometimes being used in ways that even on the supplier side is said to be contradicting what they're standing for.
Siemon Wezeman, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Really appreciate you talking to us.
Thank you. You're welcome.